As an undergraduate history student, and given that Stefan has a degree in history, why, as a discipline, is history filled with lefties? The historical evidence is that socialism is a failure, and thus shouldn't it be the opposite?
So I can tell you why I think there is so much leftism in the field of history, and I was, dragged ass backwards through the holly bush of Canadian leftism. In every single school that I went to, there was just this entrenched leftism, and it is so entrenched, and the people are so surrounded by an echo chamber that to question this stuff is literally like saying, well, slavery had some really good points. We shouldn't just dismiss it out of hand. They consider these arguments and these debates so done, so completed, that it's like you want to return to Genghis Khan style rape and pillaging if you talk about the free market. And it is a brutal, brutal environment for any kind of free thought. And the annoying thing is that even on the left, they get lazy and bored and entitled, and with all of the attendant bullying, which comes from that kind of mindset, because they don't get a workout from people who have opposing opinions. This is why people who are from the free market school, or even people from the right, like sort of traditional American, kind of religious, pretty conservative, small, those people who come through academia are like the ultimate warriors, Oh, went through leftist school, retained value of free market, can lift trucks with my penis. Like I have such respect for people. Now, if leftists come through, I don't know, I mean, I can't even think of a place that's right-wing higher education. But if a leftist came through that kind of environment, I'd say, good on you. I mean, way to buck the tide. The swimmer who swims against the current develops a lot stronger muscles than the person intellectually dead floating downstream with tadpoles chewing on their nuts. So I have a huge amount of respect for people who come out of academia who retain the value of the free market. But the reason for it, I believe, is that if you look at mythology, and by this I mean the fantasy genre, there's two kinds of fighters in general. There are those who fight with the sword, and there are those who fight with magic, with spells. Now, that's really fascinating. And the way that it generally works in most fantasy role-playing games, or in most, is that the warriors start off relatively strong. They peak early, and then they don't get a huge amount stronger. Now, the wizards start off super weak, but end up with these ninth level spells that turn them into deities and that kind of stuff, right? I know this sounds very abstract, but I really do have a point here that I think will be quite powerful.
Oh, I can
So,
understand that. Yeah, I played my fair share of games, so I know that. I can understand the analogy.
okay, so when we look at a wizard, what is a wizard? A wizard is somebody who changes the behavior of matter using language and gestures. Language and gestures are the two things that are used in public speaking and are used in shaping the ideas of those around you. Now, any movement starts off hopeless and ends up unbelievably dominant if it succeeds. Right? Again, anti-slavery and so on started off like, are you crazy? That's blasphemy and so on, and then ended up as the dominant, at least in the West, obviously the dominant paradigm that's not even questioned anymore. Not that it should be, but um, so I view university as Hogwarts. See, university is where you go to learn the magic spells that move matter, that change your physical environment. Now, that sounds kind of abstract, but it's actually very concrete. So if you make the case for redistributionist taxation, you are taking a giant verbal scimitar and slashing years of people's lives and then moving their wealth, their labor, their time, their efforts to other people. I mean, it's sort of like you get to. I'm thinking of the second Star Wars film that came out. I don't know. what sequence it was, the fourth or something like that. The Empire Strikes Back. And in it, Luke Skywalker lifts the X-Wing out of the swamp on Dagobah, whatever. He lifts it out in the swamp and moves it. Now, that's redistribution as taxation. You are lifting massive amounts of wealth, physical things, because nobody cares about the money. They only care about what it buys. You are lifting people's lives. You are carving off years of their life over the course of their paying of taxes, and you are moving all of that material, all of those goods, all of those services from one group to another group, using only the power of words. It's truly astounding when you think about it. Think of a tariff wall. It's like this giant magical force field. You put up this giant force field, and foreign goods can't get in. It's like a giant shield spell for foreign sweaters or whatever the hell you're putting your tariff on. You have the power as a word wizard. You have the power to create mountains of fruit and lakes of butter and wine. Because you can set up these weird agricultural tariffs where farmers get paid to destroy stuff. You can, through language, you can set fire to entire fields of suspected drugs in South and Central America. Through the power of wizardry, you can set fire to an entire country, like Iraq. You can, through the power of language, through the power of warmongering, you can corrupt and virtually destroy the entire genetic base, the entire genetic integrity of people around Fallujah with gene-destroying weaponry. Through the power of language, you can turn paper into gold because you can get people to accept fiat currency in exchange for gold. So the most powerful magic, the most powerful force in the human universe is language. And this is why magic users start off weak and end up incredibly powerful, far more dominant than those who merely wield the sword or the gun. So the power of language is where the very intelligent people go to wield the greatest power. Now, this, of course, used to be religion. And it is, of course, still to some degree. Through the power of words, through the power of language, you can separate a foreskin from a baby's penis. You can rip off a third of the skin of a baby boy's penis. Through the power of language, you can cut a clitoris off a little girl. Because it's only because of the belief systems that these things occur. Through the power of language, you can effectively castrate someone and have them never have sex again if they go into, say, Catholic priesthood or something like that. You have this incredible capacity and power of language. And when you look at the power of language, the real warriors are in the ivory towers, and the amateurs guard them with swords. But the real power in the world is in language. And so the people who are teaching you and the people who are studying the magic of storytelling, the magic of fantasy, the magic of Manichaeism, or of creating opposite poles of moral alignment. Those evil foreign capitalist fruit companies, bad. The noble peasants who just want to work on a collective and feed their good. And when you create that paradigm, you create a whole physics that moves materials and lives and goods and money and produce. It moves it around the world like telekinesis, like foreign aid is just a language web. But what it does is like a giant magical catapult. It rips resources out of the poor people of rich countries, flings them across oceans, and has them land in the coffers of rich people in poor countries. The amount of goods and services and lives that are ordered around and moved around, like people are just levitated, their arms are separated and is put over there, and their money is separated and pulled in two and put over there. It's all done through this incredible telekinesis of credible language and the construction of a moral edifice, the questioning of which makes you immoral. And so if you are somebody who wants power in the world, study language, study rhetoric, study sophistry, study the capacity to change people's minds without touching them or threatening them in any way, shape, or form. Now, if you can sell that narrative to people, then you will get your way for generations. Because the soldier's arm wears out. He gets old, he gets creaky, he gets arthritis, he wants a nap. But the language skills of the sophists, of the Hogwarts wizards of human manipulation, only tend to grow with age. Which is why, in wizardry, it is the old who are the most powerful. Whereas, of course, among the knights and the fighters, the physical fighters, it is the young who are the most powerful. And look at the way that it works in society. This is my proof. The young are physically stronger than the old. Who rules society? It is an oligarch of crypt keepers who rules society. The old get benefits and free health care and pensions vastly out of proportion to anything they ever paid into. And the young get debt and worse schools and less health care and lineups and inflation and 50% unemployment. Because wizards rule and the old are the best wizards. So the reason that people on the left are in academia is that's where the power is. It's like saying that the old line, I don't know if it's true or not, attributed to the bank robber. Why do you rob banks? He's like, well, that's where the money is. Well, why do you go to academia? That's where the real power is. That's where the real power is. Now, if you wish to have the power to use language to rip apart human lives and move the produce and the materials and everything where you see fit, like here's another force field that is entirely made up through language. It's called a border. See, you can walk up to here, you can walk up to this imaginary line, and then bang! No further. You can go no further because you've run into words. Brazil. Well, that's Argentina. Well, that's Paraguay. That's Mexico. They're just words. You have run into a magical force field called a border where you cannot pass. None shall pass. It's all made up. And you need a magic spell book called a passport to get across, which you must buy from the wizards who've created the force field called a border in the first place. When you look at the world, it is a shimmering tapestry of imaginary language that everybody thinks is completely real. The Matrix, as I've said before and will say again, is words. Now, if you're interested in human freedom, then what you want to do is identify the irrationality and anti-empirical nature of the magic spells that keep humanity enslaved. We are enslaved through language. We are enslaved through sorcerers. We are enslaved through wizards. Wizardry is our true hierarchy. And if you advocate for freedom, you do not want your words to be magic spells that order people around, that force people to obey, that drag them off to jail, that put them in costumes or uniforms and have them do things that would be murder and assault and kidnapping in any other context. Because the great temptation of those of us who are great with language is to use it to control the resources of the world, to use our magic spells to rearrange the goods and services and human lives of this world. But the people who are on the left wish to create language that gives them power. And they wish to create stories and paradigms and artificial divisions that give them power. They have gone full Boromir, right? There's a ring of power called language. You can use it to identify false narratives and to dispel the magic. Dispel the magic. Blow it away. Because it only exists in the mind. And that which exists in the mind can usually be expelled through philosophy. That is the exorcism of sophistry. So it only, these things, these spells, it's like voodoo. It's only if you believe in it does it have any power over you. So the people on the left, they don't want to give up their power. They want to use the traction of fantasy and morally compelling narratives to organize, order, control, manipulate, have power over humanity. Those who are into the free market, we are using our skills, our sophistry, a power of whatever language we can command to attempt to dispel the magic and to say that what most people call truth is actually magic. And once they understand that it's magic, they will also understand that what they call truth is merely a convincing lie. And academia trains you so much in the matrix that you think it's real. They train you so much in these narratives. The evil rich, the virtuous poor, the necessity for the government to shield you from corporations and protect you from enemies and help the poor and heal the sick and the aged. And right, they just create this massive narrative that is so believable that you just voodoo yourself. And we live in these bizarre, fascistic, crystalline mind structures of word wizards who came before us. And almost nobody lives in anything as simple and prosaic as reality. Reality is there are no countries. Reality is government doesn't exist. Reality is ethics is universal. Reality is your income is not very good at predicting your ethics. Right? And the reality is that everyone who tells you that you must be their slave so that they can save you from an enemy is the enemy they're describing. Is the enemy that they're describing. And everybody knows this deep down. Everybody knows that there's no such thing as government money. Everybody knows that taxation is theft. Everybody knows that inflation is theft. Everybody knows that the welfare state traps the poor. Everybody knows that government schools are getting worse and worse and worse. Over the last 10 years, disability benefits in the US have gone up 50%. A third of those people have another piece of fiction called a mental illness, which cannot be detected in any physical test, in any way, shape, or form. Well, you see, you have chemical imbalances in your brain. Really? Would you like to show me that in some sort of chart or graph or blood test? Well, no, we can't really do that because we have a magic spell book called the DSM-5, which casts a spell on you, and then we get to pump chemicals into you, which make an imaginary disease into a real one, in my opinion. So from gods to countries to cops to taxes, we live in the manic, obsessive control paradigm of manipulators who are insane relative to reality, but fundamentally sane when it comes to their use of power over humanity, who they view as livestock. You cannot order an equal. This is fundamental to all human relationships. You cannot order an equal. You can only order a subordinate. And everybody who wishes to create orders wishes for themselves to be the farmer and the slaughterhouse technician, and for you to be the livestock. And there's no better way to do that than language. And there's no better school for the dark wizardry of propaganda than academia.